For some reason, a lot of modern Christians still like Thomas Aquinas, even though everything he ever said has been soundly debunked. So let's do some more of that, right? I'm going to throw in a twist, though, and include one of the more obnoxious theists that we've come across in a long time. Won't that be fun? Now, I know what you're going to say. The last time we looked at video productions, it was a complete disaster. So why would I do it again? Well, I don't want to condemn an entire channel on the basis of a single bad video, so we're going to give it one more shot. Maybe he was just having a bad day, I don't know. At least let's give him the benefit of the doubt and see if he's just a crap apologist, or maybe there's something of value there. I'm not holding my breath on that, granted, but at least we can say we tried, right? So here goes a video on Thomas Aquinas. Hope it's worthwhile, but if not, at least we'll get some laughs out of it. So away we go.
One of the central arguments of the God Delusion, Richard Dawkins' book.
Yeah, I'm going to have to break in here to say, who gives a shit what John Lennox has to say? Lennox has been soundly roasted time and time again, but he's still pushed out there by the religious because, I guess he's got a British accent and pretty much nothing else. Who cares? Certainly not I. Because Lennox's arguments are every bit as terrible as the rest, relying on nothing but fifis and faith and all the bald assertions and assumptions that the religious require, without having any actual evidence for anything at all. So with that out of the way, let the pandering to Christian sensibilities begin, I guess, because that's really all they have. Won't that be fun?
Is the famous schoolboy argument. If we believe in a creator, we'll have to ask who created the creator.
That's kind of caused by you, though, isn't it? The religious are really to blame here because they're the ones making the unjustified assertions that their magical friend in the sky came from nowhere and has always existed, without being able to provide any evidence for any of that at all. If it wasn't your get-out-of-jail-free card, then atheists wouldn't have to point out just how stupid it all is. Because the real failure here is that the religious think that their bald-assed assumptions are on the same level as established fact and scientific discipline, and they're simply not. You don't just get to say, well, my God is whatever. You've got to be able to prove it, and they're not even trying. So if you want to know who's to blame, look in the mirror, because it's all your fault.
Now, his third argument that he offered was the simple question, who created God?
Because you're the one pretending that everything needs to be created, and then you're just inventing a special exception for your imaginary friend out of whole cloth. This is your solution. But it's not a solution at all. It's just special pleading, and all we're doing is pointing out the fallacious nature of your claims. First off, you have no demonstrable God at all. This is like trying to tell me Harry Potter's birthday, which according to J.K. Rowling was July 31st, 1980, but that's not real, that's fiction. Just like your God, at least until you can demonstrate that your God actually exists and that you have some verifiable way to know anything about this magical spook in the sky that you made up. You don't get to just assert shit. You have to be able to back it up, and you simply can't. That's why nobody but your religious cronies take you seriously when you pull this stuff out of your ass, and they shouldn't. Your wishes and dreams don't matter. Only your facts and your evidence do. And let's be honest, you don't have any.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, where did God come from?
Because those remain fair questions until you can demonstrate with evidence that God didn't come from anywhere. It doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter what you have faith in. It matters what you can prove. And sadly, at least for you, you can't prove a damn thing. This is just the theological out that you give yourselves because you really want your imaginary friend to be the all-powerful creator of everything, even though you can't demonstrate that he is. You can't demonstrate that he's real. What you really wish was true is irrelevant. This is why the question comes up so often. We need more than, but my God is like this. Well, how the hell do you know that? Where is your evidence to back any of that up? These are questions that need answers, and sadly, you don't seem to have any, at least not any that pass rational muster.
Being philosophically consistent and being a very honest person, I'm sure you can tell me where God came from.
In this video, I will explain Thomas Aquinas' answer to the question, who created God? In like 90 seconds!
And I'll just head it all off right there and save you the time. How did Thomas Aquinas know any of these things that you're about to present? Where is his evidence? Of course, you won't have any because he didn't have any. He was just running on pure fifis and faith too. We've taken all of Aquinas' arguments out before and completely dismantled them. But the religious keep using them regardless, so we just have to keep doing it. Aquinas doesn't get a pass. Aquinas was just as ignorant as you people are. Our standards remain the same, and he simply can't meet them. So I wouldn't expect this to be any more than, this guy said a thing. But hey, we're giving bruh another shot, so I guess we have to see where this goes, don't we?
Let's begin by defining God. God is the first cause of everything.
But that's just a claim. It's not something that you can demonstrate actually happened in the real world, and that's where your entire argument falls down. You're just asserting things that you cannot conceivably know. You just really like the idea, but just liking the idea isn't sufficient. You have to be able to show that the idea is actually true, and that's where you run into problems. This is just a giant argument from ignorance like everything else the religious say. I don't get it, therefore God. You don't get to just assign a cause where you don't have one demonstrably existing just because you really like the idea. But that's really all they can do, isn't it?
How do we know such a being exists? One argument is called the argument of efficient cause,
which is just philosophical masturbation and theological bullshit. Now, I'm assuming he's going to explain it, so I'll wait to rip it apart until then. But all of these arguments start with the bald assumption that this God thing of theirs is real, and then sets out to get to that preconceived conclusion because that's where they really want to go. And who out there doesn't get annoyed by this asshole's attitude? That, more than anything, is why I not want to do any more videos, because this guy sounds like a moron. He sounds like he's a self-assured jackass that really loves the sound of his own voice. But, you know, we're here for substance, not aesthetics, so let's let him keep going and make a complete fool of himself, because really that's about all they're good at, isn't it?
everything that exists was caused by something else.
And that's the reason the Muslims came up with the Kalam, because the original cosmological argument said exactly that. Then people started asking, well, what caused God? Since God is ostensibly a part of everything, and thus, since everything is caused by something else, what caused God? So the religious had to find a way around that, which is why Kalam popped up and added, that began to exist. So they could just arbitrarily claim that God didn't begin to exist, and Bob's your uncle. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way because they can't prove that God didn't begin to exist. They can't show that God exists at all, much less never began to exist. But they're running around with the goalposts and playing make-believe, so really, what do you expect? They can't just define things into existence, but that's really all they're doing. You have to show that your definitions point to some real existing thing that is demonstrable in the real world that we can study to determine if your definition has any merit, and they can't do that. They don't have that. And that's not exactly a surprise, is it?
You came from mom and dad. The building you're in right now came from construction workers. The phone you're watching this on came from kids in a sweatshop in China.
Sorry, but I don't watch anything on my phone. I'm not one of those people who has my nose in my phone all the time. Yeah, I know he's making this for the young and dumb, but phones are for talking, maybe for texting, maybe for looking something up online in a pinch, but they are not a credible media device. There is no way to actually enjoy anything on a 6-inch screen. So I get he was trying to be funny and failing miserably, but come on, just produce something worthwhile and stop making a fool of yourself. But that really seems to be all they're capable of doing, doesn't it?
Those kids came from their mom and dad, who came from their mom and dad, who came from their mom and dad, and back and back and back and back and back and back. When you follow the cause-effect trail as far back as possible, you arrive at a being that is somehow powerful enough to create everything inside and outside of the universe. We call this being God.
That's a claim. That is not demonstrable fact. This is just what you really want to be true, but you can't show that it actually exists. This is the problem that the religious have, one among many. They are looking for a being. They can't show that it's real. They're just making a whole bunch of assumptions here that are not remotely credible. It isn't a being unless you can show that it's a being. It's a cause, and causes don't have to be intelligent or caring or any of the things the religious try to staple onto their imaginary friends. They also don't have to still exist. That's something that you'll never get them to admit because they are trying to treat this cause just like a security blanket. There are ulterior motives at play here. Even if we agree that there has to be some ultimate cause, and I don't, but even if we did, that doesn't make it a God, and it certainly doesn't make it their God. That's something that they have to prove, and they're not even trying. They're just assuming and asserting, and that is never, ever, ever going to be enough.
Now your question. Well, who created God? Say I knew the being that created God, and his name was Ryan.
But here's the problem, and this goes for pretty much all religions that pull this, and most of them do, but there's a point at which causality completely breaks down. In our universe, that's the moment of the Big Bang. Beyond that, we have no idea what the physical laws of whatever might have come before might have had, and there was a before, colloquially, because without time, we don't know what before means, but, there was something there that it all came from. That's where causality fails, because we don't know if causality was even a thing prior to Planck time. So there goes God right out the window. This is why you need evidence, and the religious have none. So we're right back to, well, it seems to me theology, and that's absurdly empty. That's why you have to be able to demonstrate that this stuff exists objectively, and as we already know, they're not even trying to do that. They're just asserting, and as I said before, that is never going to be enough.
Wouldn't that make Ryan the first cause of everything? Thus, our definition finds a new culprit, and God is actually Ryan. But say I discovered that Ryan, who created God, Ryan was created by Kelly. That would make Kelly the first cause, and Kelly would be God. As you can see, we are right back on the cause and effect train.
So, instead of being able to back up any of this with evidence, they just assert that God never had a cause. Not that they can prove it, it's just an easy way out of their problem, and because they don't care about the actual state of reality, they just say, well, this is how it's going to be, and pretend that actually makes a difference. It just doesn't, because here's one thing that I've noticed about the religious. They're just using God as a title here, not a name. God isn't a specific entity, it's just what they want to slap on whoever happens to match the description that they really, really like. So if a Hindu deity actually created the universe, that deity would be God. But that's not how they're treating it. They're pretending that only the Christian version gets to be God, but they haven't shown that the Christian version actually did anything or even exists in the first place. If Satan did everything, then Satan suddenly becomes God, right? Now that doesn't sound right, does it? Because they'd never accept that. I mean, really, who knows? Especially under their musical definition game, so this is already pretty silly. And clearly, Bruh hasn't thought about any of this for half a second, and I suppose we shouldn't really be surprised by that either. These people don't think about their theology at all. They don't compare their theology to demonstrable reality, because they don't care about actual reality. They just really want to believe.
And we've missed the entire point of the efficient cause argument. The argument states that the nature of our reality necessitates a first and eternal cause, because the loop of cause and effect cannot go back forever.
Says who? This is the problem with relying on old thinkers and, common sense, because neither of them are demonstrably true. We learn new stuff all the time. Aquinas can't change his ideas to reflect new knowledge because Aquinas is dead, and even in his own time, his ideas were complete bullshit. Every single one of his 5 ways had serious detractors because they were then, and are now, just nonsense. This is the problem that the religious just can't get through their heads. They are out there making assumptions designed to get them where they want to go, but if you get rid of those assumptions, the whole thing just falls apart. That's why the second that any of this garbage shows up, I just tear it down, because none of the assumptions are justifiable or rationally defensible. They just really want it to be true, but that doesn't make it true, does it?
Thomas Aquinas worded it like this: God is that which no greater thing can be conceived.
And Guanillo came back with, there is an island so great that no greater island can be conceived, and pointed out said island doesn't actually exist. Because you can just make this stuff up in your head for anything. Islands, cars, gods, you name it. You can define a thing in your head that you really, really like, but that doesn't make any of it real, does it? That's why they go so horribly, horribly wrong, because it's the reality that matters, and they are actually talking about supposedly real things, but there's a serious misunderstanding of the difference between invented things in your head and actual things that exist in the real world. You have to be able to show that what you really, really like in your head is actually real beyond your head. And they don't even try to do that, do they? Why? Because they don't care. They just want to believe.
If there is a being more powerful than God that created God that was the actual first cause, then that being is God.
Then God is a title, not an entity. Anything that can beat up God becomes God, and the whole religion falls apart. You can tell nothing about this supposed God, which is half the point, but since you can't know anything about this God, then why would you bow down and worship it? That's a fair question, and one that the religious have absolutely no answers for, beyond asserting, it's my God. But how do you know that? Because it's my God. These conversations just go in circles, because you have a specific vision of what your God is like, not that you can prove it or anything, and everything requires faith that your God and the actual first cause of such a thing ever existed at all, and I'll give them that for the moment just because, are one and the same thing. The first cause could have been completely natural. No being, nothing that has wants and desires, just a purely natural event, but the religious can't admit that because there goes their fifis and faith, right? This is why they simply cannot look at any of this rationally. This is why they have no evidence for anything. Because if anything happens other than what they really want to be true, their entire religious underpinning falls apart.
God was not created and was the first cause of everything.
Because you say so. That's what it ultimately comes down to. This is just, well, it seems to me theology, which is just as pointless as, well, it makes common sense. No, it doesn't. And common sense is a damn stupid thing to base your views of reality on, regardless. Not that these people care or anything, because they're just running downfield with the goalpost strapped to their back because they really, really want to believe, but they have no good defensible reason to believe any of it. They don't care. It's just emotionally comforting, and that's the only reason they buy into it at all. It's all stories that they tell themselves while they quiver in their safe spaces because the real world is just too scary to be interacted with. That's why they need an imaginary father figure in the sky to watch over them, because they're too terrified to actually deal with reality on their own. They are immature children living in adult bodies. There's no other way to put it.
So the question who created God is not actually an argument, it's more of a clarifying question. Hopefully this video helps clarify the answer to that question for you.
No, it just makes you look like a complete idiot who has never had a rational thought in your head, not even once. This is really the problem with the religious. They are so attached to their religious beliefs that they can't test any of them intelligently. They can't think about what they believe. They just have to believe it. They just want it to be true, but we all know just how irrational that is, right? It doesn't matter what you want. It matters only what actually is. All of the objections I pointed out are fair and valid, but the religious can't consider any of them because they're in a desperate race to get back to Papa God in the sky. These are terrible arguments, and they were no less terrible in Aquinas' time. Even people back then knew bullshit when they smelled it, but today, modern Christians, at least a lot of them, they seem to have lost that ability. They just want to believe, but that is not now, and it will never be enough. And that's why they all look so damn stupid, and people like Bruh, they only exacerbate the problem by making these ridiculous videos that appeal only to dumb people. I mean, that's the entire apologetics industry, isn't it? It's really a damn shame that there are so many dumb people out there to appeal to. These are not smart individuals, and that's why they're in the pews. That's why they're suckers that give all their money to the church. That's why this stuff appeals, because they're all a bunch of dumb shits. And that's kind of sad, right?